Heyo, welcome to November. Alongside all sorts of upload upgrades and juggling live streaming and all of the rest of it, we're now officially opening up a whole new series on the channel, Cancelled Films. The idea is pretty self-explanatory. I just happened to find a massive archive of film projects seemingly dropped quietly in the past, so today we're going to be tackling one of the very top ones on my list about a top-tier staple of the gaming world, of course being the near-perfect experience that is Portal. Created by company Valve, back in the day, these guys were known for making the best of the best with video game content, from both a story, mechanical, and ethical perspective. Digging their fingers into the earliest modern first-person adventure shooter games, as well as exploring the limitations of what's possible in a video game engine, to opening the floodgates to massively online PvP, as well as the rabbit hole that is the community content aspect and expansions beyond gameplay. They're also the creators behind one of the first open source animation programs and, as they're more known for now, being the monopolizing driving force behind the distribution of downloadable video game content, and offering some pretty impressive deals along the way. And while there are still noticeable ventures now into things like the VR world with what is probably the best game on the system at this point in time, when it comes to gaming content, Valve have certainly seemed to have taken a noticeable backseat on their next moves. There's no major sequels for any of their iconage, and at most, there was a community-helmed 10-year anniversary update for Left 4 Dead 2 earlier in the year. But while Valve are clearly remembered for being some of the greatest of video game companies, and they certainly have a highly functioning business even these days, during the height of their online presence to the average guy at least, there was a whole other avenue they were similarly curious on burgeoning out with, and that is the bodacious challenge of video game movie adaptations. And of course, with games as exemplary as Valve's library, clearly this had boatloads of hype behind it too. In addition to that, this project wasn't the idea of some no-name director overstepping their boundaries and just approaching Valve. No, this was a project being stitched together by none other than big-name J.J. Abrams. So let's get into all that. Pull back 7 whole years and we've made it to February 2013 at the DICE Summit 2013. This is basically your yearly networking conference for all things video games, and back during this era, there was a particular conference being held by, what do you know, both Gabe Newell, the head honcho to Valve, as well as the main man himself, J.J. Abrams. Now this conference isn't honestly all too much. For the most part, it's more of a broad discussion you would typically hear between creators from each very separate entertainment medium. That's it. They're comparing what makes adaptations to each so different, what are the pros and cons to each different format, and there's a good bit of banter accompanied with video evidence to show just what the other creators does wrong in their storytelling potential. Or so they say, you know how it is. These aren't big brain revelations either, it's the stuff we kind of all know anyway. In games, you can jeopardize the story by having too much control in any given cutscene, and in movies, a sense of immersion is lost due to characters or just the camera not doing exactly what you would do in this scenario. The point of the conference is just to showcase a typical conversation that would take place between two folks like these, ending off in the announcement that though they are very aware of the limitations of these different mediums, they are both fans of each other's works and are both invested in coming together to overcome these trials to create dual projects together. That is your official announcement of this film project, though the actual details are still kinda hard to stick down. Gabe says they're interested in making movies, be it a Portal movie or a Half-Life movie, which on its own sounds like either one or the other, or both, but nothing since has really confirmed anything, or there's certainly a lot of conflicting information on it. Because while any of those options are open, there's also the chance of a singular movie being made that covers both of these bases. As for those of you that don't know, both Portal and Half-Life the games share a pretty closely connected cinematic universe together, with the two corporations from each game, Aperture Science and Black Mesa, being direct rivals to each other in the ways of business. Plus, there's a noticeable correlation between both of their weapon inventions, and there's all sorts of other smaller details that combine the two worlds together. So while technically this is supposed to be the cancelled Portal / Half-Life movie, I'm probably gonna lean more with Portal, because it's more of what I know, and it's more marketable in a YouTube sense, and I think the details are kind of unclear anyway. Nothing particularly stands out for the Half-Life project over the Portal one. So that's how we're gonna tackle this. And hey, this is a brand new series, so if you're interested in seeing more, then do be sure to subscribe. Only you can help balance out my skewed unsub ratio count. And yes, I'm supposed to be the Rat Man from Portal. I'm a little bit themed, and I've certainly got the quarantine hair for it. It has been getting worse every time I have to do a new green screen recording. It's Oh, it's going to be something. If you want to see it to be even worse, actually, I am now live streaming from today. Every week, every time a video's out, I'm probably streaming. Because it's Monday today, we're doing our very first IRL slot of a stream. And how IRL-y can it get? Well, I'm going to show you all about who I am on a molecular level. We're going to be going through my DNA results that I got from a ancestry test I did a little while ago. And I guess it's kind of fitting that I'm in some scientific gear. So if you want to see all of that, come join along. I'm also going to catch all the Pokemon every Monday. And tomorrow we'll be streaming as well, doing some modded game, probably like Bethesda or something. So come along to twitch.tv/DazzReviews if you want to see all of that. This is probably my longest green screen session so far. I apologize. But I look the part. A little deranged. I can't see through my own eyes. So this announcement was pretty much the only majorist news that ever really came out of this project. No major details on story or cinematic approach or anything really came to fruition, which ultimately opens up a whole lot of potential for where the film was going. It's mostly up to speculation. In the way of Portal, there are two mainline games. You'll never guess the titling pattern. Portal and Portal 2. Taking us through the trials of test subject 1, Chell, being seemingly the last surviving human test subject being endlessly subjected to testing chambers by an overbearingly controlling AI until she eventually escapes her confines, confronts the machine GLaDOS, and destroys the whole facility. Only to be pulled back in, woken up 65,000 years later, or 20 years later, depending on different sources saying different theories, and having to do it all over again. This time overthrowing a tumorous AI, stealing control of the facility, learning of the ancient history of Aperture Science, and teaming up with GLaDOS, now mutilated into a potato battery, and overthrowing the Master once again. This time actually being granted her wish to escape. And while this is the basic plotline of just the two mainline games, there are additional mediums that add more to the story. Between the events of Portal 1 and 2, a digital comic pieced together how Chell was placed into stasis, revealing it was the likes of Ratman, Doug Ratman, the last surviving human scientist who's been evading GLaDOS's gaze behind the scenes. And remnants of his trails are also seen in the games too, which nicely connects everything together. This comic introduces us to a whole new perspective from a mentally disturbed man, as well as a glimpse into the company before GLaDOS was activated, and little bits about why Chell is involved in all this, being the top 1% in tenacity, being abnormally stubborn, and refusing to answer questions for her form, a nod to her silent protagonist's existence, taken now more literally as canon. All of these then combine to be the perfect traits against someone like GLaDOS, precisely why Doug Ratman chose her to be prioritized for reactivation as test subject number 1. God, I love that trivia fact. Other spin-off titles have also arisen, such as the VR Repairman/Catapulter game, the AR game for funsies, a board game of test subject manipulation, and a bridge construction game. Piecing all of these story beats together, it's clear there's all sorts of story avenues that could be explored among the Portal universe. Whether it directly follows the escape of Chell and those that she meets along the way, whether it tells the origin of Aperture Science either through the rise and fall of the original boss Cave Johnson, or the invention of GLaDOS herself, it could tell the latest part of the timeline, where GLaDOS finds robotic test subjects and trials them endlessly to find an archive of thousands of humans in stasis, and adopting birds. Then there's the unstable reality of Ratman and his schizophrenic understanding warping what is real and what's not. Or even the sciencey reality of the equipment of Aperture Science, where it's clear all sorts of machinery have similarly gained sentience and ambition. Or even if we do just go with the cinematic idea, maybe it doesn't even connect that strongly to Aperture and is just a Chell-like character going in between the two corporations in the same world, you know? Chell does end up on the surface at one point, so maybe it just follows her meeting Half-Life people, you know? Whatever the case, finding a story that is both compellingly true to the world of Portal as well as being genuinely intriguing to audiences new and old is something the team will have to conclude on, and funny enough, they'd found a little help already online. You've probably seen this video pop up in your recommended, whether it was 9 years ago or just 2 months ago. YouTube's recommendations are kind of a weird place. This is Portal No Escape, a live-action short fan film based off of the series. I remember it back in the day. It's just your standard fan short, right? I mean, there's plenty of those kind of things. We've all watched Corridor Digital at some point or another, or seen some random other fan shorts on YouTube all the time. Well, interestingly enough, the director of this short, Dan Trachtenberg, was recognized thanks to their works on this film, actually using this short as a pedestal to eventually get them hired in Bad Robot Productions. Why is that important? Well, Robot Productions is an American film and television production company led by none other than J.J. Abrams himself. It all just loops back around. Dan's work on this Portal short and his connection to J.J. Abrams now has led some to rumor the idea that he too was involved in the writing process behind this whole Portal project. I mean, it certainly makes enough sense, right? So how does No Escape's approach take things? Well, the short is a pretty standard story. We have our Chell look like stuck in some kind of prison-like confinement. Clearly tenacious enough to not pass any opportunity, she keeps herself strong, works out where to find a hidden portal gun, and makes a run-and-gun escape, only to reveal that even the escape was an orchestrated trap. She remains imprisoned on a bigger scale than she ever realized. Nice. And the visuals look very intriguing, having a very gritty reality approach that's not just a carbon copy cutout from the games. And that's all there is to it. But seeing how the realistic approach to the environments turns out is still fantastic to be able to see with your own eyes, and would certainly be a welcome style for a full Portal film going forwards. But of course, this is all just speculation and is the closest thing to any real reference we've got. Let's return to the facts, shall we? So Dan Trachtenberg has since gone on to continue his filmographic career, helming the directing of 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was also produced by Mr. Abrams, of course, and he also directed one Black Mirror episode, Playtest. The dude really likes his video game content, I guess, doesn't he? Even still, while Trachtenberg is just a rumored crew member, J.J. Abrams was all but confirmed, but this was back in 2013. Fast forward through time, and the ideas of this guy being available to work seem a little bit more of a fantasy. After all, since 2013, the guy's been involved in 26 film and TV shows to different capacities. And of course, the big elephant example in the room has to be the new Star Wars trilogy as well, or at least 2 out of 3. With all of these bigwig projects on his desk, it can be assumed that the concept of a Valve collaboration simply fell to the wayside due to priorities, fading away from existence without much of a big bang announcement of its cancellation. Except that's not what happened at all! Flash forward to 2016 and we've all experienced The Force Awakens. J.J. Abrams is clearly busy, but he knows where he's at this point. And while going through the marketing motions of 10 Cloverfield Lane, he's approached several times to give an update on the project, the Portal-y Half-Life one. And things don't actually look too grim, with him actually confirming that development is still going on, but there is simply nothing to tell that's actually exciting. However, writers have been established and they are said to be working on both stories, telling us there are, for a start, 2 separate stories going on, and presumably they are still in the early phases of writing at this point. And this was all there really was from JJ talking about the project any further. Of course, it fueled all sorts of speculation anyway. I mean, I'm still here. Looking at how busy his personal filmography had gotten in the second half of the 2010s, many started to assume that while Abrams is somewhat in charge, it's more likely that he personally will be taking more of a backseat while other members of Bad Robot Productions invest in the time. It's here people really started the idea of Dan Trachtenberg jumping in. The actual confirmations of who are the creators on these projects are still not officially given, but given the fact that Abrams has said that he wants to focus on more original ideas and less on sequels and reboots, you can assume the thought of him not being a front-running figure to be more of a compelling case. Though of course it's still kind of a grey area because it's not a sequel or a reboot, it's not original either. This is what keeps nerds up at night. Beyond the wild assumptions from fans at this point, very little more was revealed at this time, until a full year later when Gabe Newell hosted an AMA on Reddit in 2017. Of course it covered all sorts of other prompts and questions as well, and probably covered each IP he's ever done in existence, but the one relevant piece that popped up here were 3 specific words. When questioned about the existence of movies set in the Portal and Half-Life universe collabing Valve and J.J. Abrams together, Gaben clarified that yes, they're coming. That of course went on to spark several posts upon several posts immediately and was probably a bigger wave of news online, but that's it. That was the last we officially heard of the Portal/Half-Life movies. It's well known that J.J. Abrams has a crazy schedule, so naturally a lot of projects will be on the back burner, and a lot of times these things just never really work out. On the other hand though, there is still an open door for the release of that Portal film, and Half-Life 2, you know, sure. Funnily enough, in the case of 10 Cloverfield Lane, it was filmed with almost no hype surrounding it, and it wasn't until a month or 2 before release that people were even aware it existed. So there's a good chance something similar could be happening here in order to quell expectations and chuck a surprise at all of us. The skills of the crew members have a very stark resume if they are the ones involved, and even the casting options could be pretty simplistic depending on which characters they choose to focus on. If it's not an original tale in universe and is instead using the iconic characters, then I personally would be in love with the return of Stephen Merchant's poignant voice, or Anna McClane's irreplaceable filter that's only been granted small cameos up to this point, and man oh man will I riot if we don't see a return of Chell's voice actor too. Blasphemy if otherwise. At the very least, with Valve making small movements on the gaming front again, be it VR or small updates, it's clear there's still room for more content sometime in the future. Maybe it'll take the form of this J.J. Abrams production, or maybe this is part of a growing list of just unfortunate unrealized cancellations. To be 3 years on from the early writing stages that have no significant updates to give us, that really leaves us to be very much in the dark. Maybe it's already ready and we'd simply need a season of practical filmmaking and some post-production work. Or maybe we'll have to dig up the ancient trivia news that Quentin Tarantino once stated they'd be interested in making a Half-Life movie back in the day as a fan of the games. Now wouldn't that be an interesting approach? Whatever the case, this Portal/Half-Life project is soon to be 8 years old, and with nothing to really show of it, we'll just have to imagine what a project like this could have been in some alternate, better reality. Over there they have the cake and can eat it too, though it probably would have been a trilogy without that third film anyway. For now though, I'll be ending it off here. My name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. And man, I just have to say, on the topic of Portal at least, I love the Ratman story. I don't know if it's just like the unreliable narrator element and like all the weird kind of psychedelic elements of it. It just seems like it's got so much runtime for it. I feel like you could tell a million stories with it, so I really like it. Hence why I'm playing the part as a mentally traumatized apocalyptic soldier scientist. He's not a soldier, what am I talking about? Anyway, if you want to see the stream, it is on twitch.tv/DazzReviews starting 7 PM UK time, so 2 hours after this video probably comes out. We'll be doing that fun IRL thing and the Pokemon, and we'll probably do like Fallout 4 or Skyrim modded tomorrow, so do join us. That streaming schedule type of thing will be going all the way through 2020, so I'm probably streaming if you're watching any video of mine in 2020 on the day it comes out. So see you over there, hopefully.